The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. We're thrilled to be here with you on this Wednesday morning. As you can see over my shoulder, in just a minute, we're going to be joined by Evelyn Kung, and she is going to be answering your questions in real time. This entire show is meant to be interactive. We love to hear from you. We love to know your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, your concerns. Our fabulous Traven is going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect with us. While he does that, I want to remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. Now, you can be tuning into us on iTunes, and by the way, on iTunes you can watch it with sound, or you can take it in the car with just sound. You can watch it with picture, however you want. You can watch it on YouTube, all the other places that he's showing you. But if you go to autism-live.com, you can watch the live show there, and you can chat with us there in a very anonymous way. At the very bottom of the page, there's a little button that says chat. If you click on it, it opens up a window, and then you can type what you want there. Even I don't get to know who you are unless you tell me who you are. So there's that. There's lots to do on that page besides watching the live show, so I encourage you to find the pathways that excite you and get you to the information that you want. And if you can't find that, let us know, because we're still building that website out. Our hope is to make it as user-friendly as possible for all of the many people who might be stopping by for information. So I'm thrilled that you guys have the opportunity to use that and that it's anonymous. Please notice that when you are on that page, a pop-up will come about 7 seconds after you're on the page. I know, I avoided it for a long time and said, no, we don't want the pop-up. But the truth is, many of you were asking for information about how will I know who's on the show. And so we have put the pop-up there. It asks you if you'd like to subscribe. It's free to subscribe. It won't cost you anything. We won't spam you, but what we will do is every week send you the little postcard in the email that says, here's who's on this week, and then you'll know. And on the rare occasion that we have somebody super fabulous extra that we are going to go live with outside of the regular hours, or we're going to have an event, we will send you an email letting you know about that too. I know that you all love when Temple Grandin joins us, and she almost never gives. I call Temple to say, Temple, can you be on the show next Tuesday? And Temple will say to me, nope, I can't do that, but I've got time right now. That's usually how it goes with Temple. And I always have my makeup on and a producer on standby when I call her, because over the years she's done that many times. And then we do an interview right then. And wouldn't you want to know, so that you could be somebody asking one of the questions? So that's what that subscription thing is for. And you can unsubscribe at any time, but that's what that is for. So if you do take the time to fill that out, that's what you will get. And it's totally free. All right, my friends, I am very excited once again that we have Evelyn Kung in the studio with us. And Evelyn is, tell us again what your title is.
I'm the clinical director here at CARD.
That's pretty fabulous. That's a pretty fabulous title. And I know that that means that she is this amazing wealth of knowledge, that she's been working in this field for many more years than you could tell. And with all kinds of individuals on the spectrum. So she has that great wealth of knowledge that she shares with us when she comes to answer your questions. We do like to give the disclaimer that there is no expert in this format. that could give individual specific advice. That's just not a possibility. That would be a disservice to those individuals on the spectrum. Somebody needs to have more interaction, more information than what we can allow for in this format. So all of our experts, including Evelyn, will be giving information of a general nature that hopefully will help you to know what questions to ask next, what pathway to go down next, and talking to the expert that is local and there and has eyes on the individual.
Yes.
So, having said that, thank you so much. You have been so wonderful this summer, filling in, and you've always been a regular on the show, but you've been doing extra duty this summer while we haven't had Dr. Granpeesheh. We are told that we have Dr. Granpeesheh back next week, and that's a wonderful thing, but we will miss you.
It's all right. She has amazing, she's always amazing to have
And
on,
you'll come back. Won't
Yes.
you? Okay.
I will come back.
All right. I don't know if you happened to see, we were talking about it last week about how I said I always get to do fun things with Evelyn. That's
It's really fun.
and that one of the most fun things that we've ever gotten to do is to go to NASA with Temple Grandin and get a tour of NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, with Temple Grandin and a bunch of astronauts. I'm just saying, it was a really great day.
It was a highlight.
It was kind of amazing. And then, of course, everybody was celebrating the 50th anniversary of the moon landing the other day. And I was like, I don't know that I've posted all of these pictures. And I still didn't post all of them. But I posted a bunch of pictures
didn't
on
have it looked.
Autism Live's Facebook site and then shared it to my personal Facebook site. So there's, I don't know, like 23 pictures. And you're in some of them. So you might enjoy that. But super, super fun. And it brought back a lot of memories. But we get to do a lot of fun things together. That's just one of the many things. And so is this one of the many fun things that we get to do together. So we're going to launch right in here. And you guys can be writing in right now on Facebook and on YouTube. And we'll check in with you there. But I'm going to launch in. We're waiting for intel on another question, but we're going to go to the second question.
Very good.
I get notes home every week about my son. He is imitating his classmates when they cry or scream, and then it causes those kiddos to get even more upset. He also tries to stop them from crying. Knowing my son, I know he always wants people around him happy. If I make a sad face, he takes his fingers and turns my frown into a smile. I can only imagine he does this as well at school. What kind of social stories or tips do you have so that I can teach my son that if someone else is upset, it's okay? I hope this makes sense, and anything you can suggest would be helpful. Another thing you should know is that they do use headphones to cancel the noise. I've told them not to use it too much because OT says if you use them too much, it can be harder for him to get used to noises, which he doesn't like, which I agree with, and thank you so much. So, kind of a two-parter there. But what an interesting young man who, you know what kills me all the time is that people who don't know about autism think that our kids don't have empathy.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So many of them have empathy, but maybe it's not in the same way how it's
Right.
displayed. And if there's no vocal language, then it definitely isn't the same.
Well, but imagine that here's this little boy who seems to be upset when other people are upset, which I think, demonstrates
It's good.
clear empathy,
It's great
right?
because that means he's recognizing something out of himself and it's something important,
Yes.
and it's the right importance.
And that person is uncomfortable and he would rather have them be happy.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot there that he's not understanding, but he's recognizing other people's states and he's saying, I don't want you to be unhappy. So in any case, I whenever people say, well, people with Asperger's are on the spectrum, they don't have empathy. And I'm always like, no. That's
It's also when people recognize that they have a social child that has autism.
right.
And people
because
get so
clearly,
confused.
right. I mean, my kid was a social butterfly, and people were like, "Oh, he must not have autism." He was a social butterfly in that he wanted to connect with other
Yes.
people. He just couldn't do it.
Yes.
He didn't have the skill set to be able to do it, and it was hard
Yes, it was so hard.
and
But
frustrating.
But people have this general idea that they think
Yeah.
that our kids aren't social, and there's
Yeah.
so many of them that are very social. They just don't understand and know what to do
Right.
in those situations.
Right, don't have the skill set. Okay, so for this mom, she's looking for some tips, tricks, maybe social stories about other people being upset and it being okay.
Well, first of all, even before we get to that,
Yeah.
I love that he actually imitates other kids.
Yeah.
It might not be socially appropriate, but the fact that he imitates means that's one part of development that he's doing. And what you want is for him to take that imitation ability and do it with all those other typical kids out there.
Yeah.
You know, because that means he can learn that way. And that's how a typical 2-year-old learns.
Yeah.
They see what's going on and they just copy what other people are doing, and they get some enjoyment out of it and some social interaction that's appropriate.
Yeah.
And they start to figure out what to copy and what not to copy.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that he has that ability is great. And you want to use that as much as possible because that's something that he's already naturally doing. So you need to get him with people who aren't having behaviors and get him around people who are doing things the right way and really emphasize that because there's so many people that don't think about it in those terms.
This is one of the things that I've struggled with from minute one when my kid was diagnosed is that we have in our education system and somewhat in the mindset of the world is that, well, if they have autism, then let's put them in a group of people that all have autism and we'll all work on this thing together.
Yes.
Right? And I call it the segregation plan.
Yeah.
Where, we're going to put your kid in a special day class because he has communication deficits and we're going to put him in a class with everyone else
That
who
has
has communication
deficits.
deficits. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work for me.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons why I think inclusion done right, and I'm putting that in there, inclusion done right is key. I saw this clearly with my son that we were going to an early start program that wasn't doing much for us, but and eventually we got kicked out of. But there was one day that my son could do all the things that the other kids in the class could do. One day out of however many days that we went. And that was during spring break because one of the other boys brought his older neurotypical brother with him who then we couldn't get Jem to sit in a chair. He couldn't do it. The other kids sat in circle time. Jem couldn't do that. This boy walked in. He was like 6 years old. He sat down in the chair, and Jem watched him do that, and he was like, oh. And he walked right like he did and sat his little tuchus in the chair. And the other boys started doing all the things that I had prayed all along that my child would do, but instead he was kicking and biting and screaming the whole time. And he sat there, watched that kid, and whatever he did, he did. And I went, it's a miracle. And after that, it was like, good luck trying to talk me into him going anywhere but with the kids who can do things.
Yeah, no, I always tell, like when I talk to behavior analysts who are creating programs, I always say the first step is just making sure they can imitate. And they're not done imitating until a parent comes back and says, hey, we went to a birthday party or a family event this weekend, and the kid just walked in and started doing what the other kids were doing. And I was like, okay, then it's mastered.
Right.
That's when it's truly mastered. When you see it outside and they're just imitating because they know that's just what they should be doing.
Okay.
No matter what the age.
So great that this child has this, and this child is in a classroom that apparently is full of individuals who've got some issues. So maybe mom wants to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, if he's doing it and nobody's focused on it, that means he has some very high level ability. And you want him to be challenged.
Okay.
You want the skills to keep coming.
Okay.
And the thing is, and he's also social and empathetic.
Yeah.
Good skills.
Really good skills.
You really want to make sure they're in the right place, that they're getting handled the right way. Because I understand, like, let's say the OT says, like, you don't want to use the headphones too much because then he won't get used to the sounds.
Right.
But really through all of this, the whole thing is the function. He wants them somehow to be better. But when they're crying and, and he doesn't know how, the question that's not here is we don't know how much language he has.
Okay.
How much understanding. How much receptive language, how much vocal language. Because many times, especially if they're younger kids, you can teach some phrases at the beginning if they have the ability to echo some words. So, just words that, will be in society appropriate, like, it's okay, or just like, or just recognizing, like, if they like to be touched, to be able to touch them. If the kid doesn't like to be touched, to know to back off.
Right.
And just teaching them about the kids in his class. Like, this kid calms down when there's music. This kid calms down when there are hugs. This kid calms calms down when, and whatever it may be. But there's all sorts of functions going on. And even though we might want to say, hey, let's give you one way of treating this, we can't, because you really need your local BCBA and the teacher in the class to figure out, why are these kids all crying?
Yeah.
You know, what are they doing this for? Some of them might be crying as a form of communication, just saying, get me out of here. And some of them might be crying because they are truly seriously like hurt or something else, and there's another need that needs to be met. You know, I would love to be able to say, hey, let's do this social story for this group. But we really don't know enough information.
Yeah.
And this is where you need your local person to really give some feedback. You're talking about social stories. I love social stories, except people tend to use them with kids that don't understand language. And that is actually a pet peeve of mine.
Okay.
Is people will use social stories with kids who don't have the comprehension of the words. So they might start repeating things that are said in the social story, which makes them look like they understand, but they don't understand. So what ends up happening is the kid gets in trouble because they're vocalizing and they're repeating a story that they heard, and it might be like, it's okay, you're okay, or whatever, but maybe they won't stop.
Right.
And then other people think that they know what all of it means.
Okay.
And then they get punished because they're saying these things that they think that other people think they understand.
Okay, so if you've got a kiddo who you don't feel like their receptive language is super strong, that they really are understanding what's being said to them, how would you go about teaching them that when people are having emotions, that it's okay?
Yeah, a lot of it might be just practice. You know, whatever might be appropriate for that kid. And a lot of times in classrooms, I say, get to know the other kids in the classroom. And if you are in a special needs classroom, hopefully the ratio is small enough, you know, whether it's, 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, that you would be able to get to know each kid and what each kid likes and what to do for each kid. And then you can teach your kid to comfort each one in the way that each kid likes. And because this is a spectrum, I'd love to say teach them one way and it would help all, but that's not going to be true.
Well, not only that, I mean, I don't know if you watch The Big Bang Theory, but, Sheldon was often a case study in how to not teach things properly. We talk about generalization all the time. And Sheldon was taught rules, and Sheldon followed rules, and our kids will. But the rule for Sheldon was, if someone's upset, you make them a cup of tea. That's what his mother taught him. You make them a cup of tea. So there were all these jokes throughout the show about, something horrible happens, and in this very inappropriate moment when he should be saying something else, Sheldon goes to the kitchen and puts the kettle on, and everybody says, what are you doing? He says, I'm making them a cup of tea, because that's what you do. And it isn't always right.
Yeah, but I have to say this. I just actually, because I record it, and I just saw the finale.
Yes.
And the rule that they taught there is the rule I always say here, which I loved, which is the rule that Sheldon learned is you need to teach them that change is the rule.
Yes.
That things always change.
Yes. I loved that, that they could end on that note, because so much of the show for so many seasons was about him needing to have it this very particular way with no change.
Yeah, and then that's what I always tell families here. The ultimate rule that we're going to teach all the kids is change occurs and it's okay. You handle it the way that you handle it.
Yes.
But for this person, really, maybe you want to go in and learn about those kids and what helps each one of them, and then you can teach it kid specific to each one of them. And actually, that's really good for your kid.
Yeah.
To know that not
Very
the same
good.
thing is going to make each person okay. And, it's nice, it's funny. I've had actually a lot of kids come to me and try to make me smile. And even when my own kids were younger, because people are just used to me smiling. So when I go into neutral face for therapy, the kids actually really hated it when I was a therapist.
Yeah.
They hated it when I would just go into like a neutral face with no expression. And I wouldn't be sad, but they'd always be trying to like move my lips to smile. And I would just give really clear rules, like I will smile when this happens.
Yeah.
And that became the reinforcer.
Yes.
For each one of the kids.
When you think about it, it's a pretty high-level skill to notice and to want to change. I mean, that comes along a little bit later on the progression of being able to do things.
Yeah, and the thing is, I loved that they understood this is the face, that this is what we want from you, and I want to make it. And I'd be like, I'll smile if you do this. Like, let's get, we'll have some fun. And so with each of these kids, I'm not giving you one, and I feel bad that I'm not giving you one way of addressing this, but it is, you sound like you have a child who's very social, a child who knows how to imitate. So maybe this is the time to find out what each of these kids likes in this class and to teach them what makes each one happy.
Yeah.
And to be a part of that and to learn to wait probably. And there are times when your child probably just needs to ask to leave the room.
And, for me, as far as the OT thing and the headphones goes, I mean, of course, you don't want them to spend their whole life with headphones. I worry about if the child is in a classroom where there's a lot of people crying, I would find that a sensory nightmare, right?
Yes.
And so if the OT wants to work on that, my suggestion would be work on that at home. Ask the teacher, bring a tape recorder, take just the ambient noise around the classroom for 10 minutes or whatever and put it on a loop. And you can have that playing in the home and have it start really, really low without headphones and turn it up gradually so that he begins to get used to it. But if it's really troublesome in the classroom, I hate not giving him the thing to make it okay for him in the classroom. How do you feel?
And if your child actually, when you try this at home and nothing happens, from my experience, there are the group of kids that have the sound sensitivities.
Yeah.
But the majority of the kids, it's not, I feel like, at least in my experience, it's not the sound sensitivity. It's the sudden onset.
Oh.
That like, it makes that suddenness.
Yeah.
Even with babies crying.
Yeah.
It's the sudden noise that seems to be more alarming to the kids.
Okay.
So if it's the sudden noise, that's a very different way to handle than
Okay.
if it's just the noise in general. Because people will say, oh, he can handle noise in all these other settings, but it just happens here.
Interesting.
And it happens with babies when there's newborn babies. A lot of our kids have difficulty with a newborn baby, but I think it's the suddenness of the cry that is more alarming to so many of the kids than it is the actual noise. It's very, very different. And even I have a 26-year-old just recently, the parents called me, they're on vacation, and they said, we have this issue, and she's always had trouble with babies crying, but these babies were in a restaurant and they were making happy noises, and she was very loudly saying, going shh, like just saying she wanted them to be quiet, and she just didn't recognize the difference too.
Oh, interesting.
So we just started doing some recognition about when a baby is happy and when a kid, like a toddler essentially, when they're happy with the happy noise,
right,
and with the crying noise,
right.
And when she would see them, it was interesting because she knew what happy and sad were.
Yeah.
But when she just heard the noise from across the room, she automatically thought it was a sad noise or a bad noise. So we were like, okay, let's start looking. Like, you have to look at the kid and for siblings and cousins and just being out in the environment. There was a lot of teaching because in her head she thought they were all like not good noises.
Yeah.
So like the kid could not being empathetic.
Wow.
But she actually knew, and when we were showing she's happy, it's making her think. We're still teaching it now, but she's looking and being like, like
it's a lot of things to put together when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things to put together.
But it was like happy noises.
There we go.
What are happy noises?
I like that. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with more Ask Evelyn Kung. Stick with us. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're at the ABCs and XYZs of Special Needs Conference. And this year, for the first time, they've got something really remarkable. It's the Entrepreneurial Boutique. These are all items that have been made and are being sold by individuals who have special needs. So we're going to do a little shopping and talk to some of these fabulous entrepreneurs. Come on.
My name is Molly Rarick, and I'm founder of Breed's Gift. We're a nonprofit that serves teens and adults with special needs, like Chase here. We were founded in 2013 and serve people in the Conejo Valley, Santa Barbara, and LA.
Our main objective is to give our participants the skills they need to gain a more independent life.
My name is Shelley Cox, and Lisa Zalagi and I are founders of Creative Steps and Create Micro Business Enterprises. And the items that we're selling here today are all made by the clients who have passions about what they want to make, and then they get the profits from what they make after we've paid all of the other expenses.
We are here today because My goal is to be independent, and also I would like to share all my artwork, and I would like to sell.
Thinking about at his young age being a businessman, it's amazing. I cannot be more proud.
Welcome back. Well, that was an interesting fade, Traven. I don't think I'd seen that before. We're here with Evelyn Kung, and she's answering your questions in real time. I sort of skipped over the first question and said we were skipping the first question, but it wasn't the first question. The first question is, what is the cost of card? Now, a week ago, we had somebody say, what is the cost for ABA? And now we have somebody asking, what's the cost of card? And, you know, it's all expensive, and that's kind of what we said last week, and I shared that one of my favorite things is Holly Robinson Pete wrote the blog, the 8 things the world should know about autism, and number 1 is no one can afford it. And I always think of that as that means Oprah can't afford it, and if Oprah can't afford it, then we need to forgive ourselves, you and I, for not being able to afford it. Card is expensive. Like, there's no two ways about it. Card is very expensive. ABA is expensive. Card is expensive. And a lot of times, in general, ABA providers will, they should be offering what's clinically suggested, and some of them don't.
We are in the norm. So
completely.
So don't even think that we cost more or anything else. We work with families. You should know that. We work with families often. Most of our families are funded in some way, whether it's school district, insurance carriers. If you're in the 23 states have regional centers, that.
Are there 23 states now that have regional centers?
I think so, 23 or 32, something
I
like
need to get up to speed on that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's quite a few states that just have their own funding sources. We've even had third-party funding sources, different people, different organizations giving some kind of grant. We'll work with you. So if you come in, we do say, since the majority of our people do receive health care insurance, due to the Mental Health Parity Act, that has allowed for health insurances to come in and provide most of the funding. Yeah. But let's say, something happens, don't be afraid to call. We'll talk to you. We'll see what you have. We'll try to kind of rule out all the different sources maybe in your area, and we will work with you. And that's important to know. What makes it expensive is really the recommendation. That's the part that makes it expensive. People might say card is so expensive, but if you did any of a lot of different ABA agencies for 40 hours a week, they're all going to be expensive. And we are in the norm.
Totally. And the point that I was trying to make is that some ABA providers will say to you, oh, well, your child needs 20 hours of ABA for a 3-year-old. And so then that hourly becomes times 20, right? Which is one amount. And card may make the recommendation for that child that is clinically expected and proven to be effective, which is 40 hours, which is double what that other. And it's not that card is more expensive, it's that card is going to tell you the intensity that science dictates, which is higher than what a lot of people will go. And and I've talked to these people, and they go, well, parents get sticker shock and just shut down and go, well, then I can't afford it. Listen, I was one of those parents. And when the first time I heard somebody say 40 hours a week for my child that was not yet 3, I was like, have you lost your mind? First of all, a 3-year-old can't do that. I was adamant about that. I was like, that's a full-time job is 40 hours a week. I'm not giving my 3-year-old, and he was about to be 3, I'm not giving him a full-time job. But the very next big thought in my head was, and I don't even know how much that is, but I know I can't afford it.
Yeah. And I always tell people whenever they think 40 hours is a lot, we always say 40 hours is just like a full-time job, yes. But a neurotypical child out there is learning every waking moment.
Yep.
So even giving 40 hours is not going to match to the every waking moment of a neurotypical child.
Yep.
And if your child isn't learning the way that we don't know how they learn, then you're going to go and try to find, and right now science says it's ABA for autism.
Yeah.
And that intensity factor seems like a lot. But I would say, you're going to look at therapy and see, it's not all It's not all rough work. Initially, it might seem that way when the kids cry, but they're crying because they don't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
It's not because it's too much work. And the thing is, we do work with families and we work with kids. Kids come in at 2 and we're like, you have a nap schedule, when are you awake?
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
well, we can only give you as much as you're awake, you know,
Right.
because we want you to be able, and sleep is important.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just working with you. I wish I could give you, saying the cost of card is high, but really it's the cost of ABA.
Yeah.
And I always tell families, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. And I like to remind families, even now, there are some times that I wake up and like have to catch my breath because I'm having a dream where my kid has just been diagnosed and I have to figure out how to make it work. And I wake up and I'm like, we're never going to be able to do it. Now I wake up and feel that way still. And I think, I lay there in the bed and I think, oh, we're not going to be able to do this. And then I have to remind myself, what we did.
We already did it.
We already did it. I don't have to panic about it. We already did it. But then my mind goes, how did we do that? And I still can't get the numbers to add up. I really can't.
A lot
like
of families have said that. No, I have other families that have said, we don't know how it worked. It worked, but we don't know how it worked.
We don't know how we made it work. Financially, we don't know how we made it work. I mean, I can point to specific days where epically bad things were happening and then epically good things happened. But the through line for me was I knew that I wasn't going to be the first one to do that, that there were tons of parents who had already figured it out. And they had lots of different economic backgrounds.
Yes.
They weren't all people living in big houses who had money stored for the child that was going to come and had their college tuition ahead of time, right? Because we didn't have that. Right? We still don't have that, right? And so I knew that there were ways. And that if I just hung around with enough people and asked enough questions, I would find these little inroads. And there are more inroads now than when I started.
Definitely.
So I always say to people, when there's a will, there's a way. If you make up your mind that you're going to do it, there's a way. There is a way. So don't be afraid. Call, ask for help.
You know, just keep trying to, anybody that knows anything, you're going to go after them and try to get information.
Absolutely.
Because you never know what's out there. And I mean, a lot of times you're contacting other autism moms and they're really busy too. And they're working on their child and their programs and everything else. And you just have to be patient, be very nice.
Be persistent, though.
Be persistent. People will help you.
And I'm always happy. We gave my email at the beginning, s.penrod@autism-live.com. If you have questions and you're like, I really want to make this work and I don't know financially how to do it, I'm always happy to work through that with you and give you resources. Email me and let's set a time to do that. There are 2 conversations that I'm always happy to have with parents because I feel like I owe it to the universe. And one is to talk people through the financial fear of this, and the other one is to talk to people about using the full prescription. That there is nothing worse to me. And if you think about these 2 conversations, there's the conversations to have with somebody who doesn't have insurance, doesn't have funding, doesn't have savings, and they're like, am I going to get left out of this, right? And the answer is no. Let's find the way. But they're desperately trying to get services started. But then on the other side of the spectrum, we have people who have the insurance, who have the funding, who have the situation in which to have it. And they're like, that's okay. I don't want the 40 hours. 15 seems like enough. And
inside.
I'm like, do you understand what other people would trade to be in the shoes that you're in? And if you're not careful, you're going to really miss a huge opportunity. And that I know your stomach lining 4 years from now is going to go, uh-oh, what did I do? So those are 2 conversations that I love to have with people because there's information that will help you on the path to get to the right stuff for that. Okay, moving on though to, we had a question that came in on the live feature. Hi, have you any advice on how I can help my 14-year-old ASD son understand turn taking during conversations? And many thanks. What a great question. And that just came in on the live feature, proving that the live feature works. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? If he is interested in a conversation, there's a bunch of components that need to be. A lot of times giving a concrete example actually is the easiest one. And sometimes it's as easy as, and it's a speech way is you have a block or an object, and whoever has the block gets to talk.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's starting that simple, because within conversations, the breaks and lulls, you have to actually teach a child to recognize what those breaks and lulls are. And a lot of times it's just not, it's too subtle and it's not clear enough. So a lot of times it's taking an old speech technique and just showing them that when this block is in front of you, it's your turn to talk, and when the block moves, it goes to someone else, and just teaching him to recognize that. But there are a lot of skills besides turn taking that are involved, because he has to be able to turn take with something that's a lot easier too. You know, a very simple game, a very simple interaction that is very clear, and understanding how turn taking works. And once you get that going, then you go into actually social conversation. And social conversation involves a lot. It's not just one small piece. And I would say that one of the first aspects of learning how to turn take is you have to make sure that your child is listening and knows how to listen.
Yeah.
You know, are they actually listening to the other person talk? Because if they don't listen to the other person talk, they're not getting information, but they don't even know to listen for those breaks and lulls that are cues to be able to turn take.
And I will say this, that all of these things that Evelyn is talking about are lessons in skills.
They are.
I don't have my little tree tent anymore. I don't know what happened to it. We moved stuff around and it disappeared. But there's a tool, an online tool called Skills for Autism. And you don't have to be a card person to have access to it. It's available for a subscription price to families, to schools, or other organizations that provide ABA. You can go to skillsforautism.com, and it's the number 4, correct? Skillsforautism.com, and ask for a free tour for them to show you around. It's a big tool. It does a lot of stuff. I think that most parents find themselves very overwhelmed and going, I need to know more to be able to do this. And I always say, no, you really don't. Just pick what you want to do. It's just like, you don't know how to do everything that your smartphone does, trust me. And you don't know how to do everything your computer does. But you use it the way it works for you, and somebody next to you uses it in a different way. This is a big tool. Use it the way, like if you sit there and go, I want to know, because we've got a question that's coming up next about self-regulation. I want to know about how to teach self-regulation to my 11-year-old. Then you go in and answer the questions about self-regulation, and you can pick from lessons to do for self-regulation. Now, it'd be great if you did the whole assessment, right? I can see you going, I'd rather you do that. But if you need to get started on something, you can just go in and pick one thing and see what the lessons are.
Yeah, and I always say actually do what matters to you, because when you go in, it's going to tell you some prerequisite skills.
Yes.
And then what will happen is, it's like, in order to do this lesson, you have to know these things, and then you're going to have to go back and probably answer some of those questions.
Yes.
You know, and especially with language. Language is one of these things where initially I always say basic speech and language is just understanding the words, syntax, how words go together, you know, how to ask a question. And then you go into social language. And that social language in skills is under social.
Right.
You know, it jumps over because it requires the person to be looking at someone else, listening to someone else, understands that if I am talking to you and I'm at a baseball game, I'm going to have to yell even though the rule is no yelling.
Right. Right.
You know, or if I go into a library, I need to whisper, because it's really quiet in there and you don't want to bother people. And just understanding, how do you know someone?
Right.
That regulates what you're going to say and not say too. And so there's all these different components in social interaction and social language that are involved in turn taking, and you know how long you wait for someone. A lot of our kids on the spectrum, especially the higher functioning kids, don't understand authority.
Yeah.
You know, so they get really upset that they're not allowed to do what this 18-year-old or 20 or 50-year-old's doing, and you know they're sitting there as a 14-year-old demanding that they should have the same, and they just don't even understand that idea of no with authority. You know, depending on who's in charge at the moment, and if they're telling you what to do, you kind of have to listen,
right?
Or you can get in big trouble,
right?
And so there's a lot of components in social interaction that are involved, and you know it might seem easy just to turn take in a conversation, but it's hard, and a lot of times you get into those executive function skills of maybe they are listening, but they just can't stop vocally.
Yeah.
You know, and so then you're working on just vocal inhibition. learning how not to like blur it out, and that might be all you practice for a while. And you know, there's all these different ways that people can learn to do that.
And, you know, like I said, there's many different ways and skills that you can look on at things. You could go in and take the assessment, and then the assessment will say, here are the pool of lessons, and then you can see by the number where the starter ones are. Or you could just go in and in the search feature type in the thing that you want, like conversation taking turns. It'll show you that lesson. You go in and you open that lesson, and it says, here are the prerequisites. Then you have to go find those lessons. And sometimes those lessons say, well, the precursor for this, and you go, oh, my child can't do that either, and it's like putting it together backwards. Either way works.
Yeah, and
if you're working with a professional, I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but if you're working with a professional, they help you to see that clearly from the beginning, and that's what a BCBA is great for. But if you don't have that, you can put it together yourself in skills.
Yeah, and you can, and a lot of you know I always tell all our behavior analysts, the parents know the kids best.
Well, that's true,
you know?
But we don't, there are things,
there's things that you don't think about. No, but there's things that you don't think about, but you know your kid.
Yeah.
So the thing is, when you're getting some kind of information, whether it's from your behavior analyst or from skills, you have to actually be able to say honestly to yourself.
Yeah.
In this context, I'm listening to this information or I'm reading this. Can my child do this?
Right.
And really, you know whether you're telling to, and you have to be honest.
Right. But the great thing is if they can't do that, then you go to the precursor skill. Well, can they do that?
Yes.
And if they can't, well, then what's the thing before that? And you might find yourself all the way back at the beginning in teaching joint attention. But for me, like, I didn't know what a joint attention was when I had my child. I just knew that something wasn't the same as everybody else. And I always still love to go to Disneyland. And it's almost like a bruise that, like, to push against a bruise, and sometimes it feels a little bit better. But I watch parents with their 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and not having to hold their hand while they're standing in line. And I go, what's that? Because I don't know about that. And I watch, I can picture there was this one woman who was with her little 2-year-old who was all dressed in like Minnie Mouse kinds of polka dots. And they were standing, waiting in line for something, and the mom, they're just waiting, and then at some point the mom like said something to the little girl, and she said, oh, look at that, and the little girl looked. She didn't have to move her head. The little girl looked, and then they looked at each other, and they were laughing about it, and I was like, that can happen with a 2-year-old, because that wasn't happening with my kid. That just wasn't there. And he would have been... he would have gone, he would have run if I didn't have a hold of him and just run, not to anything or anyone, just to run to feel the wind in his hair. And forget, if I pointed to something, his attention wasn't on me, so he didn't look at it. If I turned his head to look at it, then he would look at it, but there was no checking in with me. And sometimes that, I make the little symbol of the joint attention. Sometimes it goes all the way back to there. And when you learn that skill, then a whole bunch of other things happen. So.
Definitely. So yeah, don't get disappointed. There's a lot of things there. You know your kid. Be honest with what you think he knows or doesn't know. Because if you're not honest with yourself, then you're going to assume that there are certain skills there, and then he'll have a hard time learning it, and you'll say it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because there's a base skill missing. And a lot of times if you go back and teach those base skills, the child actually gains a bunch of other skills on their own independently without having to be taught, just because that base skill is now there, that they on their own can go and learn.
Crazy good stuff happens when you, because it's the Swiss cheese thing, that they're there and they have skills, but there's holes, right? And when you start filling in a hole, all kinds of things happen because of that. I get really excited. Okay, first I'm going to power through some YouTube comments that you guys have sent in. I love that Ashley, that you're here with us. We're going to talk a little bit about what you've written in. And Liz says, thanks for sharing and what led you into going for an evaluation. My son, wasn't talking, and really what led us to the evaluation was my mom was visiting, and I'd just gotten used to everything. I'd gone to the pediatrician and said, I think something's wrong, and she rolled her eyes at me and told me I was a late-in-life mother who was too worried about too many things, as my child was losing words from sentences. And I asked everyone, and everyone's like, he's fine, right? But then my mother came to visit, and after visiting for a week, when I drove her to LAX, And I was so glad to be getting rid of her because I loved my mother, right? And she's no longer with us, but she was on me all week long. And she was like, what is going on? And he is like, he doesn't behave. And she didn't understand what was going on, but she said to me, she said, you and your husband are terrible parents. You've done a horrible job. I haven't seen this child for 6 months, but you've ruined him. He's like a wild animal. He doesn't listen to anything. He completely ignores you. He acts like he's deaf because he doesn't pay any attention. You know, I don't know what you guys have done, what weird parenting technique you're using, but you're a horrible parent, and and horrible, right? But then I called a friend of mine and I was sobbing and I was like, my mother said this. And she said, you know, you've been saying for a while that you thought something was wrong. And I saw him the other day and he doesn't act like the other kids. And you've been saying that you're worried, and I think you should be worried, and I think you better call a specialist. And that's when we started the ball rolling. But for 6 months, everyone around us, when I was like, I think something's wrong, and everyone was like, no, it's not wrong. But finally we got the evaluation. But by the time he was evaluated, he had been talking in full sentences and he made beautiful eye contact. I have videos to show. And it was not an overnight thing. It was a very slow progression, but by the time he was evaluated, there was no functional communication. He still uttered things, but compulsively. So he had like 5 words, like he would say, dog, 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 until I would be like, stop, I can't handle it anymore. So that's why we got the evaluation. So a great dad has written in and said, trying to get a head start, looking for self-regulation tips for 11-year-old on the spectrum.
There's different types of self-regulation. This is an executive function skill. There is, a lot of times, it's the inhibition that starts first, just learning to stop. And there's 2 ways of learning to stop, and one is vocal and one is non-vocal. So a lot of times, these are all lessons and skills, by the way, and it's just the whole self-monitoring, self-regulation and there's vocal, non-vocal, but then there's emotional too. And the emotional one, I always tell families, give me 2 years. Because emotions that are evoked that are extreme don't happen every day, and we wouldn't want to evoke some of these emotions every day. That would be unethical. So a lot of times you have to wait for things to happen and then have to work on, the understanding, the regulation of it. And sometimes it's just background. So a lot of times with self-regulation, it is like learning how to stop. And I'll just give some quick examples. So if it's non-vocal, let's say a kid's walking by and just trying to grab things. I'll work on putting things, like sometimes it's boring things, and just say, don't touch it. And then just timing. Right. And then the thing on the object becomes more interesting, slowly, to the point of where if you put it down, the kid's just going to grab it. Right. And then teaching them how to wait for it. Yeah. And just wait, and then learn to ask a question about when can I touch this? Right. And just understanding and gaining some inhibition so they're just not used to grabbing and going. Okay. And that's a very simplified version, but that's one way. Vocal inhibition, I would say, with the kids who are usually it's singing or scripting or something that they're doing, and the kids are hyperlexic, the kids that can read words. Yeah. I love those kids because I'll do something like, I'm going to put a word up, but you can't say it out loud until I ring a bell, clap, point, whatever it may be. And teaching them how to see it but not say it. Right. And then when I point to them, then they can read it and say it out loud or sing or whatever it is. Yeah. And just teaching them how to gain some skills in stopping themselves. Yes. Because a lot of times with self-regulation, that's really what the parents really want initially, is just to get the kid to stop when they can stop. Yeah. And the thing is, just like any other skill that we have, you have to practice. It's a lot of practice, a lot of repetition to be able to gain control of not blurting something out loud. All of us have been places where we've said things out loud and then we get the consequence for it and we're like, should not have said that. And we realize it, and the next time we go in a situation, we remind ourselves, what is the rule? Or remember, don't say it, just listen first, whatever it may be. And but you're contriving these sessions for your child and how to stop. Yeah. And how to not do things. And then once they are able to stop, then you can teach them what is the correct behavior. There we go. And when that behavior is important. Or for let's say the kids with emotional control issues, it's really, really hard to control their emotions. And I'll just teach kids the range of, I remember one parent, we did things to cry about, things not to cry about.
Yeah.
And here are all the things, like if somebody just bumps into you in the hallway, and really it gets into accidents and intentions and everything else, but that child wasn't ready to understand what intentions are of people. So we were just saying, if somebody just bumps you, are you bleeding?
Right.
Did it hurt?
Right.
Or are people just going on their way, and then it's not something to cry about.
Right.
And it was so cute because this little kid, if someone would bump into him, at some point his eyes would start to water,
Yeah.
and he'd be like, "There's no blood. It didn't hurt, and it's okay that they bumped into me." But his eyes would just water. But it really took 2 years for him to stop getting the watery eyes.
There we go.
But then other times it was totally appropriate. And then it's just teaching all the circumstances. Like if their pet dies, it's totally okay to cry.
Yeah.
And there's no blood, and it's the exception.
Right.
It's just like, so, and it's just, then it's learning rules that anything or anyone that dies is something that's very sad.
Yes.
Whether you understand it or not.
Right.
And so then it's times to either say inappropriate things, not say inappropriate things, or to say, teach words of comfort.
Yes.
And there are things that just happen in life that you just have to learn some skills to navigate through. But a lot of times I'd say, if you're going to work on self-regulation, first stop on the not doing.
Yeah.
Because that usually, actually, when we start teaching the kids how to control not blurting out, not grabbing, not doing something that they've just done all their life, a lot of times actually the parents consider it as a behavior that goes away.
Yeah.
At least the basics are there.
Okay, I gotta get back to Ashley, who has written in and disclosed to us that she was just recently diagnosed on Monday, that she's 32 and she was diagnosed. But it appears, Ashley, that you then notified your family and friends and that you haven't heard from any of them. And she says, "I feel very alone in processing, but I'm okay." Then there's another place where Ashley says that she was diagnosed at 17 with a mood disorder, but did not explain other systems like work struggles, and just don't know where to start with the processing of things because I'm alone in this, and that her family, due to some of the things that were going on and some of her mental health problems, that basically she uses the word disowned. So I want to talk a little bit about that and give you a great website that I think will be able to help you. But also she wrote in and said, rather than teaching autistic kids to socialize with non-autistic children, I believe that non-autistic children should be taught how to approach and play with autistic children. And believe me that we are on that page as well. And believe that absolutely should happen. We've had Circle of Friends on the show, and there are a lot more organizations now that take school-aged kids and teach them skills to be able to deal with any kind of communication that comes at them, which I think is crucial and important. But you know that I always say here on the show, the serenity prayer, which is accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. That I don't always have control over the curriculum of the the autistic children. Wish I did, and by the way, try to make forays into that. But you do what you can, where you can, when you can. And I'd love for anything, Ev, that you want to say to this young woman, but I want you to know that there are so many people that are just like you.
Yes.
And that they will welcome you into their arms. You have a community of people who are waiting to welcome you. I would love to encourage you to go to wrongplanet.net and start to find some of your peer group who can help you, that are self-advocates, who can tell you, oh, this is what happened when I got diagnosed, this is what I did to help myself, this is what I realized, this is how I processed it. You'll find a great group of people. Also, the Autism Society of America has a large number of adults who are diagnosed either as children or as adults, that especially if you can go to an Autism Society conference, whether it's a local one or a national one. I have never been to a conference that has more self-advocates than their conference. And it's super cool. Oh my gosh. I love to just be able to be there in a room full of adults who are on the autism spectrum and hear their point of view on a wide variety of subjects, but just to be a part of the conversation with them and to listen to what they say to each other, what is important to them. Boy, for me, it's so edifying and gratifying, right? So I encourage you to check that out. You do not have to be alone in this.
Definitely not. This happens actually regularly now. We have adults who come in and, you know, they might say, yeah, when I was a kid, my mom thought I was quirky, or, you know, something like that. And I always say, like, look at the diagnosis and does it make sense to you? And so many people say, yeah, it does make sense. It explains all, you know, the social interaction that I've had, things that have gone wrong. And, you know, and it's really hard, I'd say, when I've talked to these adults, when they talk to their families, because, you know, families a lot of times just think an adult that first comes and says, hey, this is what my diagnosis is, families will be like, yeah, you're just looking for an explanation,
right.
And it's not helpful. But it is one of these things where I think it's learning how to communicate what your difficulties are in interaction, because one of the things that we teach a lot of our teens and adults here is you can't expect the other people to know how you feel or what you're thinking or what's hard for you. So you're going to learn how to be the self-advocate and say, like, if somebody, you know, maybe there was some kind of like interaction where there was an expectation of you and you didn't fulfill the expectation. But it's important that you learn how to communicate, hey, I didn't know about this part. Because it's not that you're intentionally missing it. A lot of times it's because you just didn't know some of the assumptions that were there that involved an activity where you were going to get together and do something. Yeah. And it's learning how to tell your family, hey, I didn't know that this was happened, or I didn't know I was expected to this. Yeah. I was really doing what we had talked about.
Right.
You know, but I didn't know about this part. Because once you start learning how to communicate what you didn't know but it was expected of you, that'll start teaching other people. Oh, so when I'm talking to her, I need to be more explicit or more concrete or whatever it may be. And at least it lets them know that it wasn't your intention to not do or not follow through on something. And a lot of times people just get mad and just end the interaction. I would say, no, communicate and learn to communicate what you did not know.
We are entirely out of time, and because I think this is like a whole show conversation to have. But definitely check out wrongplanet.net and sort of start to connect with some of those people. And there are forums you can ask questions and make friends with people. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
We've got amazing shows for you guys this week. And Traven gave me a sheet that told me everything because I can't remember anything anymore. Like, for instance, on Friday's show, on tomorrow's show, we have Amy Gravino, wonderful self-advocate. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for that. And she is the founder of Ask. She'll explain to us what that is, but you're going to want to know, Ashley. So, and then we've got Amy Sackrider, who's going to be with us. Coming up next week, we've got Susan Osborne and Joanne Lara from Autism Movement Therapy and Autism Works Now. And then on Friday, we are having a wonderful, wonderful doctor, Dr. John Pruitt, who is a psychiatrist at Washington State University, going to be talking with us about the brain and the infant brain. We're going to be very excited to have him on. That's on Friday. I got to do my math. Anyway, we're thrilled that you guys had an opportunity to be with us, and we hope that you'll join us when we're back. Until then, give your kiddos a hug for me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.